So the first part of today's conference is on the topic of IPM in the field and the context. And our first speaker, I thought it was just going to be Anna, but I think we've got a double act with Anna Morgan and Patrick Vasey from Defra. So I have a quick bio for Anna. So Anna works in within the Pesticide Hub in the Environment Quality Directorate at Defra. She leads the team, which is currently focused on the development of the UK National Action Plan for the sustainable use of pesticides. Her previous role in Defra was within the Future Farming Programme, working on the Sustainable Farming Incentive Pilot. She has more than 12 years experience of working in a variety of policy and delivery roles across 3 different government departments. Anna has a degree in biology and specialised in environmental science modules. She also has a number of volunteering roles over the years, including the Natural History Museum in London and Citizens Advice and within the local Wildlife Trust. So if I could hand over to Anna.
Thank you, Catherine. I also I'm having a few connection and technical issues this morning, so I'm dialing in from my phone. So I hope you can all hear me quite clearly. And I'm going to be relying on Paddy to share the slides. So that was a good backup. But yeah, if I'm not clear at any point, then please let me know. So yes, thank you very much for the introduction and good morning, everyone. It's really good to be here. And Catherine has also mentioned that this is a little bit of a double act with Paddy Facey, who's also in the team and has been quite a relatively long-standing member of the Future Strategy team in the Pesticides Hub, so you may well have met him before. We also have team member Brigitte Bentz on the call listening in today. So if we could move to the next slide, Paddy. So I just wanted to start by giving an update on where we are with the National Action Plan for the sustainable use of pesticides. So many of you will be aware that following the consultation last year on the draft, where we had an enormous number of responses and the team spent a long time analysing them, we had been aiming to publish the final draft at the end of last year, at the end of 2021. So but however, before Christmas, ministers took the decision to delay that publication until the spring of this year, essentially to give us opportunity to think about the consultation responses and raise our ambition, both in terms of what we want to say about IPM, but also in terms of thinking about the pesticide system overall, how it might be improved, how it could work better, whilst obviously maintaining our environmental and human health standards and the scientific basis for decision making. We know that ministers are ambitious about driving a greater uptake of IPM across all sectors, but particularly in agriculture, and want it accelerated and incentivised. This probably won't need much explaining to this audience today, but essentially the rationale here is that not only is IPM better for the environment, particularly in terms of water quality, soil quality, biodiversity, but as more and more pesticides get taken off the market, IPM increasingly becomes part of that economic toolbox as a solution for pest control. So I think over 80 active substances have disappeared over the last 5 years, and this trend will continue. So there are also important links on the role of IPM in managing resistance. So I think the conclusion there is that IPM will undoubtedly be a major theme within the final National Action Plan when it's published. And the team are currently sort of taking stock of all the responses we had and thinking about what more we can do. So part of this and part of our current work is relating to the development of the IPM standard under the Sustainable Farming Initiative, which many of you probably be aware, was in the published pipeline of standards in the Future Farming document back in November, and is planned to be made widely available from 2023. And that is one of our key incentives. So we're underway with that project, which is being led by the Future Farming team, with our close input, and we're expecting quite a significant amount of stakeholder engagement on that to start probably from February. And I see that Henry's going to cover some of the findings from the IPM test and trial in the next agenda item, and we're really interested in those findings, and we're keen to learn from them as that phase of work continues. So rather than refer to other government documents and policy statements, as I'm sure you're familiar with, we wanted to use this session a little bit differently, and make it a bit more interactive. Now, obviously, the size of the group and the limited time we have, it means that it's relatively high level, but I hope you find it interesting, and I'm sure we'll get some really helpful input. But we will welcome contact and any other thoughts or ideas you have after the event. So just to introduce that interactive part of the session, and Paddy, I think you can probably move on to the next slide now. We know that one of the key barriers to adopting IPM approaches are around knowledge and skills, and there are brilliant examples of IPM best practice out there and existing networks and guidance and information. But if we want that to become more widespread and contribute to reduce dependency on the use of chemical pesticides, we've been thinking about what the sector needs. And as part of the work feeding into the final National Action Plan, we're thinking about this in terms of an IPM toolbox. And it's a bit of a happy coincidence that this is very linked to the objective of the session today, the whole meeting today, to better understand how to deliver practical IPM solutions to farmers. And looking at the agenda and what's to come, the sessions today, I'm sure, are going to be really helpful for us, and hopefully at least one member of the team will be on the call throughout the day. So in terms of things farmers need to access to successfully implement IPM, based on what we've learned through the consultation, we've grouped this around these 5 key themes that you can see on the screen. I'm not going to go through these in any particular order, and actually want feedback on their relative importance later. But first is the advice. So, a two-way interaction, both parties developing trust that's required if the advice is to be acted on. We're seeing that the provision of advice is likely to come from agronomists, land agents, currently. So second, the peer-to-peer learning and knowledge exchange. Our assumption is that this is very effective. It's trusted information, provides opportunity to see things working in practice, has potential to grow confidence and skills. And we know that there are existing networks out there, obviously things like the demonstration farms, as well as case studies to learn from. Third, we have guidance. So it differs from advice, obviously, in that it's a one-way transaction. It's not in terms of knowledge transfer, and can happen through a variety of media, so written material, online information, video, audio content, that sort of thing. Fourth, formal training, so developing skills through accredited courses or certification. And here we're thinking about courses provided by organisations like City and Guilds, Basis, amongst others, as well as thinking about the role of the Institute of Agriculture and Horticulture. And fifth, the decision-making tools, and I'm sure this will link to Mark's presentation later this afternoon, but this is potentially quite broad and include things like IPM planning tools, assisting with monitoring and calculation of thresholds, risk forecasting, think about weather patterns, and evaluation tools. So quite a bit in there. And across these 5 themes, we know there are lots of things already happening, maybe fragmented in places, potentially difficult to navigate sometimes, but we're particularly thinking about what the role of government is in delivering or facilitating these aspects of the proposed toolbox. and obviously keen to hear from people if there are any big things that you think we've missed. So expecting the final National Action Plan to build on what was in the draft that we consulted on, and we want to develop specific sort of commitments and options under these headings or these types of headings. And so that's really just a bit of an introduction. Paddy may bring in some more specifics under each of those headings to prompt some ideas and thoughts from you as we move through the session. But that's all I wanted to say now. So I think we can stop sharing the slides, Paddy, although on the next slide there is the website, the menti.com and the passcode, but I know that we're also going to put that in the chat. And we will start the interactive session.
Great, thanks, Anna. I'm hoping that everyone can still see my screen. I'm going to go over to Mentimeter now. So please, someone else on the panel, let me know if you're having problems with seeing what I'm presenting here. But hopefully you've all, so what we need you to do is either go to menti.com, which hopefully some of you might have a browser window open with menti.com, and there's a code along the top here, which you can enter in there. Catherine?
If you could just move your slide up, just so that we can see, because it's not easy to see in the chat, certainly not for me at the moment, so I'm not sure whether other people can, just so that they can see the website. Maybe just go to your next slide. You've got
okay,
you've got the
am I still sharing PowerPoint? Let me stop sharing and restart. That might make it a bit easier. Let's do it this way around.
People in the chat are saying they can't see the code.
How is that? Is that a different screen now?
Yeah, we can see the code at the top of that.
Brilliant, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so that's...
I think what people... Oh, we've got the website as well. That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So if everyone can go to menti.com and type in that code, you will get to a participant's side of this presentation where you will be able to answer these questions in an interactive way. It should be quite intuitive, and I'll try and talk you through it as clearly as I can. But if you're having problems engaging with the answers, feel free to write them in the chat through Zoom, and we'll be able to pick up your answers and gather information that way. So
Paddy,
before
just briefly, Paddy, just to clarify, when people go to menti.com,
yes,
that code that they need to put in is that 49075510, if people haven't spotted that.
Brilliant, thank you, Julian.
Okay.
So I can see we've got some people entering answers already, which is fantastic. So we know that people are getting online. So just to introduce these questions, so as Anna said, we really want to utilize the experience in this kind of virtual room as much as possible, and gather some info on what are the most practical solutions that we can support as government, but also how these parts of the toolbox can best be supported and how important they are to farmers. So this first question, you'll have the options to rate each of the components of the toolbox that Anna has introduced on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low and 10 being high, on how important they are to farmers. So I'm hoping that that's quite straightforward. I can see we've got nearly 35 out of the 100 participants who've been able to vote already. So I'll give you a few minutes to get on with rating those options. If you're having problems, you should be presented with a slider on the screen for each of these options, and you just click and drag to select which score you would like. You can also skip one if you don't want to answer for one of the 5 areas, and then you can unskip it if you've skipped it by accident. So hopefully that's helped if people are struggling with the interface. So back on the Zoom screen, for those with double monitors or who are wanting to switch back once they've answered, you'll be able to see a distribution of the answers, and it's quite interesting to see that we've got advice coming out quite strongly in the lead behind, just followed up by peer-to-peer learning. And interesting to see that formal training is sitting a little bit lower, and there's quite a clear group of people, about 16 participants out of the nearly 60 that have submitted answers thus far have rated formal training as only 5 out of the 10. So that's interesting. I wonder as well whether this is reflecting, and it's something that we can pick up in the later question, which we'll have more opportunity to give your views rather than just selecting options, but potentially relating to what is already existing provision. And that's something that we want to be thinking about as well, as what more can we be doing in these areas? If one of them is being particularly delivered well, does that require the same focus? See, guidance is also rated quite importantly, and I think it's also worth mentioning that, you know, we're aware that these are all highly important areas, and this is not to deprioritize any of them, but it's just to get a gauge. I will give the group another minute or so, so we can see if we can get those numbers up a little bit. We've got 62 participants thus far. But if they start to really tail off, I will move on to the next question. So we're all aware the way that Mentimeter works is when I move on the presentation screen, you'll get a prompt at the top to follow along your slides, but you don't have to move on in that case if you're still considering this question and would like a few more minutes, a few more seconds. Feel free to join on to the next question after. The next question is question 2 of 2, and we will be leaving it open for much longer. So people have opportunities to type in their answers. So there's absolutely no rush to move on to the next question if you've only just got the hang of the technology, for example. Great, so we're at 65%. I think that's pretty good capture. I'm sorry for those who've maybe struggled or not able to use the tech. As I say, please enter any of your thoughts in the chat, and feel free to. We'll be sharing our emails afterwards. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So please do get in touch if you have a view on these questions or any of the other things that we've talked about. Just before we move on to the next slide, we can see that early trend has stuck quite well, and we've got advice coming out quite strongly in the front, with 22% of participants rating it 10 out of 10 for importance to farmers, followed by peer learning, which is a slightly wider distribution but still representing quite high scores, followed by guidance, then decision-making tools, then formal training. So that's really interesting information for us. So thank you very much for that. I'll now move the presentation on to the next slide. As I say, you should get a prompt at the top to move on. And this is a free typing answer. You can type in as many suggestions as you like, and we'll leave this open until the end of this morning's session, assuming that the technology will allow me to do so. So please feel free to consider this on at your leisure. The question is, what can government do best to support the delivery of IPM solutions to farmers? So as Anna has alluded to and spoken to in her slides at the intro, all of this stuff is happening already in various ways, delivered by various groups, bodies, organizations. And there is some brilliantly effective work ongoing. We're really interested to find out how we can best support in delivering this whole suite of options to farmers. We're getting some really interesting ideas through already. It's also worth noting, as you've got the opportunity to type directly into us, and we'll take these away and have a think about them, is please feel free to pick up on anything that you feel like we've missed in those 5 options of the toolbox, and any other comments on the role of government in delivering practical solutions be greatly valued. interesting, we've got fund IPM research and knowledge exchange coming up a number of times here, and that's something that we've definitely been talking about as we've been developing these options, that there needs to be a focus on what is coming into the toolbox, what's coming into the package of decision-making tools, what's coming into the various aspects of advice, and making sure that that is up to date, continuing to evolve with practice, and also relevant to the wide range of crops grown in the UK. So that's really interesting to see that come through here as well. I'll scroll down. I'm expecting that we might get quite a number of these, so I'll try and pick out some interesting ones as we go. I've seen a number of comments on independent agronomy and fund unbiased farm advisors and funding of advice, free advisory service. That's an interesting theme coming out as well. In the National Action Plan consultation, we posed the question about considering the difference between tied and untied agronomy, and I think that's something that we've spoken to a number of stakeholders on, and we're keen to engage on further and understand the role of advice in IPM and who's best to give that, and that'll be a really interesting conversation to have with, I know, a number of people on this call as we go forward and develop the advisory parts of the toolkit. Advice that is free to farmers at the point of delivery. A few more calls for funding of IPM research. I think we were expecting a strong funding theme in when you open up a question of what can government do. So glad to see that you haven't disappointed there. But great to see it directed very specifically in this instance. Fund existing groups to provide extra knowledge exchange above their normal activities. That's quite an interesting one. Really going and stimulating extra activity of the people who are already delivering on the ground is exactly the kind of philosophy of the approach that we're looking at. But interesting again to see it, that the best thing potentially in this person's opinion is that that's a monetary input rather than a coordinating role or other ways that government could support. How are we doing for time? I'm aware that we've got 5 more minutes, so I'll speak to this for a little bit longer, and then I'll hand back to Anna to round up. But as I say, we'll leave this open. So for those typing away, please continue to do so, and this is really useful information. So we've got here encourage knowledge exchange between farmers. It'd be really interesting to understand how the person who typed that and others consider that the government is able to do that. Is that work with existing knowledge exchange networks to promote their work? Is that join up between networks that are operating in silos? Is there any more specific action that could be drawn out on that? That would be really helpful to understand. Do a big scroll down, so I realise I'm probably sampling just the top at the moment. Facilitate registration of IPM friendly pesticides. That's That's an interesting one as well. That's something that we've picked up previously, and as you will well know, we have had a biopesticide scheme for some time, but it is under review through the NAP, and something that we want to take a focus on in the future, and the role of biopesticides as part of the IPM approach. Comment here on the specific challenges for potatoes is very relevant, and the challenges of individual crops need to be properly addressed, and we need to make sure that these solutions are applicable on a crop by crop basis, and that the advice and alternatives and solutions are available at that level, and that we're not speaking in the general principles when we get to talking directly to farmers. Brilliant. I see we've hit 100 entrants on this question thus far, and we're going over, which is fantastic. So I think I will hand back to Anne now, but thank you very much for your involvement. It's slightly disconcerting presenting to a group of people like this when I'm not able to see them, but hopefully there weren't too many grimaces, and we're not a million miles off with the work that we've outlined here. So yeah, please continue to pop suggestions in, and as I say, and Anna will reiterate, please get in touch if you have any questions or anything else to add. I will try and go back to, I'm actually going to stop share and reshare because that seemed to work better last time, to go back to our slides. Here we go.
Great. Thanks, Paddy. And presumably that website will stay live for a period of time if people want a bit more time to add in further thoughts.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, but I think we've captured a huge amount of information in a really short time there. I have noticed there are a couple of questions or comments from Chris in the chat, from Chris Hartfield from the NFU, sort of emphasising, that I think in my introductory talk, I spoke about us knowing about one of the biggest barriers is around knowledge and skills to uptake of IPM. But yes, we absolutely do recognise also economic viability that you've referenced, and the kind of de-risking it from a financial perspective. And I suppose when we've been thinking about the toolbox, we slightly de-linked those in thinking that the future IPM standard under SFI will play some part in offering that financial incentive and de-risking, taking on more of an IPM approach. But I think it's a good point, and we'll reflect on that a bit further. And also, yeah, the pitchfork, I'm sorry about that. That's what PowerPoint gave me, but it's a fair point, and won't use the farmer with a pitchfork again. But thank you all very much for listening. Our contact details are here. We would really welcome input and comments and thoughts if you want to get in touch. This period of work is quite short. I think I said that we're hoping that the National Action Plan will be published in the spring. So now is the time to get in touch. And thank you very much.